Hello there, this is Cobalt Stratos, and I'm going to do a little video on how to draw feathered wings in my style. Okay, this wing is going to be slightly curved, and the primary feathers are going to be slightly flared. When you're drawing these wings, it's actually an arm, so just to keep that in mind, it will help you with the curves. This is where the shoulder connects with the deltoid. This is the bicep. This is where the elbow is going to be. This is the forearm. And technically, I guess you could say this is the hand. This is where the fingers are. When you're drawing the primary feathers, think of them as fingers, and you can flare out your fingers, and you can actually move them individually. Well, these birds can too. So when you draw them out, they can actually curve. I usually draw about 5 to 8 feathers, these primary feathers right in here. And here's some guidelines to help. It does get from short to long to short again, so keep that in mind. But when it comes to the wrist, there's actually a slight separation between these feathers, between the primaries and, you know, the rest of the feathers. I don't really know the specific names of them all. That separation is also at the elbow too, so I just draw a line here at the elbow and here at the wrist, just to help me define each section. Now there's 3 sections, and then there's 3 layers of feathers. There's a down feather, which is the thickest part right in here that I've already drawn, and then another layer right in here, which I like to evenly space. So here we go. Here's the 3 sections with the 3 layers. Again, with the primary feathers, they flare and they can curve depending on the design of the wing itself. So with this, it's not a perfectly straight line, so don't sweat yourself. Draw them slightly curved. Now let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have roughly 6 feathers in here, primary feathers, and what I like to do is right in here I draw an extra guideline, because I've noticed that with these feathers it's not like the same thickness, and there's actually gets thicker right in here next to the base. So what I do is I sometimes draw a circle for each feather and use it as a guideline for when it gets thick to thin. So with that curve that actually does come in right in here like that, I draw on the outer line of that circle, and I keep a decent thickness for the primary feather. And I draw them slightly curved up at the end. So that's basically what each feather looks like. Now, not each feather is in its exact place, but that's okay. This is just a sketch or a guide. I usually don't keep the thickness too far away from this curved edge, just so you know. So I usually keep these feathers kind of close together, no farther apart than what I'm drawing now. When it comes next to the difference between the wrist and the forearm part, the curve does kind of, you know, blends in more, and the feather does get shorter and more thin, or at least this is what I do when I draw my feathers. And that last feather here is the last transaction. And now you draw the rest of the feathers in this section right here next to the forearm. And what I do is just draw a bunch of lines, just again, guidelines. I usually keep them decently thick for the outer part. Again, over here. And slightly smaller next to the base of the arm where it connects to the body. The same thing's going to go for this second layer. You have to keep in mind that there is some up here on the hand portion. I draw these feathers slightly curved, as you can see, because this wing has volume to it. So you don't want to draw everything completely flat. It won't give much dimension to this wing. It gets thicker next to here where all the muscles are, and then it gets thinner next to all the feathers, because feathers are paper thin. So to speak, at least. Okay, with the down feathers, don't draw any lines just yet, because there's a little trick that I do to draw them. It's actually really easy. And somewhat cheesy. Okay, getting a little closer. Okay, with each feather, what I would do is you draw the feather and slightly curve it at the tip. Now you can leave them mostly flat at the tip, like a box shape, but for the most part, slightly curved. Or at least that's what I do. Typically draw these feathers over here small, and I give it a slight curve from the outer part of the hand to where the wrist is. Slightly curve on the edge for each feather. You don't have to draw each individual feather if you don't want to, but you know, I'm going to show you anyways, just in case you're interested in putting more detail into your pictures. So, with that done, you draw the same little things for each two sections here. So with that line, it's a smooth transaction right in here. When it comes to the outer part, you can have a slight empty space right in here, but for the most part, you don't want a huge empty gap. Now sometimes the wing does show that gap when the bird's flying, but in this case, it doesn't. So make sure when you draw that line, it's smooth. Now right in here, where the bending is more pronounced, then yeah, you're going to have a very sharp turn right in here. But when it comes out, it's more smooth. Again, with the curve, you want to make sure that you give somewhat volume to these bird wings. Now slightly curved feathers. I would say don't draw the line all the way up to the next layer, not unless you really want to. But for the most part, just draw the edges of the separations so that you can see that there is a lot of feathers here. And when it comes to the other side of the wing, you have to keep that pattern of direction. So instead of curving from the upper part, curve up, you have to curve a little down on this next part. And it does get a little tricky right in here where the armpit is, because that's basically where it stops, but you don't want it to stop abruptly. So, slightly curve it in the opposite direction, or at least this is what I do. Same thing for the other last section on the outer side. Now you can draw some of these feathers slightly separated from one another, but you know, you can make them look tattered too, or smooth. Again, it's all depending on your design of character or just simply your style. Okay, let's see what we got. No, zoom out. There we go. So that's what we have so far, or this is what I have so far. And I'm gonna save that because my computer's being weird. That's the main key, save frequently. Anyways. Okay, the down feathers. This is actually really easy. It's just a bunch of little squiggly lines, pretty much. Stop it, zoom in. Thank you. With this part, it's just a slight curve, like that, just all over the place. Slightly different lengths, but still nonetheless overlapping one another at a slight curve. Just like that. Now, when it comes to the separation part, you do kind of have to draw slightly curve. for each, it's just like drawing these feathers, but instead of drawing them boxy, I draw them even more curved. And then you just layer it. Okay, now here's the transaction part, where the curve slightly changes, but it's still a slight curve nonetheless. It's just the direction of where you curve it. Bear with me on the scribbles. Again, direction of flow, changing the direction from the upper curve to a lower curve. Okay, so there's the down feathers. Not so tough. Now you can draw a little bit more between the down feathers and this next section, but that's all depends on you. So what I do is that I make it poofy right in here. I draw a lot of feathers right in here where the wing connects to the body of, you know, if it was like a pony or a horse or something. You know, it's just not, it's more pretty. So what I do is that I make it into this, the guidelines looks like this, so that it's more poofy on top, more fluffy, and then it goes out and down. And then all the down feathers are here next to the base, so make all those little squiggly curves, and draw individual feathers. Now when it comes to an individual feather, unlike these other boxy shaped ones, is that when you do draw the feather, it looks something like that for a silhouette. Now that's just the outline, but then there's this spine part, the base part of it. I really don't know the name of it, but I just call it the spine. Now with that spine, all the little fibers of the feather actually go in a certain direction. So if you want to make a feather look tattered, you draw lines going out from this base, that spine. So when you draw it, you draw some lines going out. Now you can make a V cut in the feather because then the fibers separate and gives it that somewhat tattered look. And next to the base where the feather connects, it gets kind of more fluffy right in here. Also, the outer part versus the inner part of the two sides of this feather is this part is much shorter than the other outer part. So when you draw that base, you don't want to draw it directly in the middle. You want to give some volume on the other side of the feather so that there is a side of a feather instead of just like, you know, an oval with a line in it. Okay, so with that said, and draw some more individual feathers. It's at an angle, and then you draw all those little lines, making sure that it's going in a good direction. Doesn't have to be perfect. Again, these are fluffy feathers. Goes from small feathers to larger feathers. And they are overlapping one another because it isn't just one layer of feathers, so you can draw multiple layers if you'd like. Okay, now if you want to put more details into the feathers, then go ahead and do that, but for the most part this is just a basic idea. I like to tend to draw curves with the muscles of the arm, so I'm just going to define that a little bit more. Now this next part, this is where the wing ends. So I guess what I would do would put a bunch of down feathers right in here and have them slightly go larger. Again, somewhat layers of feathers because that's where the base of the arm is and just a lot of movement. Or at least this is what I just do. Now, if you do want to put that spine and tattered form on each individual feather, then go ahead and do so. But other than that, let's take a look at what we got. Yay, a wing. So I hope this helps you out a little. Good luck with your drawings. Thank you.